Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Conversations with Carl. And I have an amazing guest on the show with me tonight. I am talking with her from across the globe. Yes, you know, this is a global show, and we try to have guests on from all walks of life, all areas of the globe. But I have a very impressive lady on today, and I am just truly excited about the things that she's doing, the stuff that she's working on, the impacting of lives that she's creating, and the busy. She doesn't use the term busy, so I will change from that term. But the many, the many things that she has that she's working on, and she is going to give us some of that and just share with us some of the things that make her such a great person. I am talking about Pauline Nguyen. And Pauline is an award winning author. She's an international speaker. She's a spiritual entrepreneur, and she is definitely coaching professionals and speaking to the minds of those right now. She's a lovely, beautiful heart. I've watched a lot of what she said. I've seen a lot of the videos that she's made, and I was just mesmerized as the kind of person that she is. But I'm going to let her share with us. I want to thank everyone who is dropping by. Thank you. Please put in the comments where you're tuning in from. We love to hear from you. For those that's going to watch on replay, please tune in. Put the comments in. Let us know where you're tuning in from. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. But I'm going to bring her to the set now with any further delay. Pauline, how are you today? Let me bring you up here. How are you today?
Hello, Carl. It is my joy to be here. It's my
It
joy to
is.
be here.
It
Today, I
is.
am excellent. Thank you for having
You're
me.
excellent. You're excellent. I am so happy to have you on. And when I was introduced, I was like, "It's so much I can say." You talking to us from Australia, right across the world. It's five. The dedication is like five something in the morning there, and you are gleaming and shining bright in the on. I don't know. I'm an early person, but I don't know about that early in the morning. Would I be so bright? But Pauline, kind of tell us who you are and who is Pauline. I know that's a big loaded question, but I always like to start out the interview with who is Pauline.
Who is Pauline? Pauline can be whoever the hell she wants to be.
I like that. I like that. I love it. I
um,
love it. I
we
love
we
it.
play we play multiple roles in this life, right? It's all
Yes.
about which role we want to play.
Yes. Which role we want to play? And go ahead. I'm sorry.
I play the role of an international speaker at times. I play the role of mother at times. I play the role of spiritual entrepreneur at times. I play the role as facilitator, coach, mentor at times. And most of the time, I play the role of a very sexual, sensual, naughty female. We all get to play roles, right? Who is Pauline?
Yes.
She can be whoever she feels like being.
This is true. You can be whoever you feel like being. Pauline, in the essence of everything that you do, the author, the award-winning author, the coach, the spiritual entrepreneur, the mom, with all of those titles and with all that you do, who was really your inspiration?
It's another loaded question, Carl. So many loaded questions. There can there can't just be one, right? There can't
Right.
just be one. If I were to keep it current, um, the people who inspire me, well, what is my daily inspiration? It's Mother Earth and Father Sun. I get a whole lot of inspiration from nature. Nature assists me a lot with answering my questions, but I think also with inspiration comes a sense of duty as well. And so, the duty as a parent, my children inspire me. The duty as a businesswoman, my collaborators inspire me. The duty as a teacher, my clients, my students, as a restaurateur, my customers. These are the people that inspire me on a daily basis.
Oh wow! So you went through a whole list of aspirations, and a lot of times we have them. We don't realize that we put so much onus on maybe mother, maybe father, those ones that we closely think about. But I am such as you. it's a lot of things inspire me. I can get inspired from sitting out on a patio, just looking at the trees. Sometimes I can get inspired by just hearing the birds chirp and those kind of things. If you're open to the inspiration, they come from everywhere, and it's not really
Yes.
one focal thing that inspire you. I like that because we're talking about the same things. We're on the same page with that. Now
I
you know
think
that
what
I
you
go
I think
ahead.
what
I'm
you were
sorry.
speaking I think what you were speaking to just then, Carl, is called joy.
Good joy, good joy. I'm learning, guys. I'm learning too as well. I'm learning too. Pauline, well, I talk a lot about vulnerability, and I know that's with you dealing with the spiritual entrepreneur. I know that plays a big part in that. Knowing yourself, being vulnerable, being open minded, having the mindset of understanding who you are, and what does vulnerability really mean to you?
What does vulnerability really mean to me? Vulnerability is the potent value exchange of authentic expression. The potent value exchange of authentic expression. But authentic expression without the fear of what the other person would think, how they will react, how will they respond, because how they react and how they respond is really not ours to own. How they react or how they respond is really theirs to own. And so vulnerability for me is the potent value exchange through authentic expression, but without the fear of how the other person will react or respond.
Wonderful. And I had said that to a gentleman. I was on the show with him yesterday, and he had asked me the question, and I explained to him what I thought the vulnerability was. And you put it so eloquently, but we tag team on the same premise. And I told him about fear. I say when you fear, I say fear have you selected a destination that you haven't even taken a journey towards. And I was telling them in the essence of that fear just has you depict this worst case scenario for an ending for something that you haven't even started towards. And I think that's what a lot of time people get with their vulnerability. They don't embrace it as that. And you said that so well, and I couldn't have said that better. It's not ours to own. Vulnerability, how the reaction to it is really not ours to own. We're just being authentic to. I hear a lot of people say that, and I'm going to segue to this. I hear a lot of people say that they're being authentic. And I've worked with a couple of clients, and I've conversated with a couple of coaches that say that they're being authentic. They're showing their true authentic selves. They're diving in, and I've come to the understanding that there's some vulnerability points in there that they're really picky about. They're really testy about. They're really not open to. And I say to them, well, how can you be vulnerable? How can you be authentic and you're not being vulnerable? Can you reconcile those two for me?
I think people have the absolute right to not share things if they don't want to.
Absolutely.
And so it's a case of it's not that I'm hiding anything from you. It is that there are things that I just choose to not expose. I think everyone has a right to not expose particular things. But when it comes to speaking the truth, if we're speaking our truth and expressing our truth, the fact is we're doing nothing wrong. If we're expressing our truth, then we're doing nothing wrong, but we do have the right to not disclose information we do not wish to disclose. But one thing I know for sure is that when we do express our truth, people cannot ignore our existence, right? They cannot ignore our
Yes.
existence. And then when they do that, um, we can be free. We can be free. When the biggest learning I ever had was to let go of what people think of me. And it's not that I don't care, I simply don't mind. I simply don't mind, because what if our purpose was to express our truth without the fear of what other people will think? And on the topic of fear, as you were speaking of before, Carl, I always say fear is, FEAR, false evidence appearing real, false
Yes.
emotions appearing real, or false ego appearing real, And so, but I do know that um, if we do want growth, fear is part of the package, right? Fear is part of the package. When we do feel that sense of fear, and I get that sense of fear in my solar plexus, in my lower plexus, and when I get that, I know that it's my body, my instrument of consciousness, saying to me, "Hey, Pauline, it's okay. You're only feeling that because you've not done it before. You've not done it before. And so that's my body telling me to go ahead and do it, because the most spiritual growth doesn't happen, when we're meditating or on the yoga mat, or avoiding situations. The most spiritual growth happens in the midst of conflict, right?
Yes.
In the midst of conflict, when we're frustrated, when we're angry, when we're scared, and then we realize, wait a minute, I'm doing the same thing here. And then we realize that we suddenly have the choice to do things very, very differently. And that's where the speaking our truth comes in. Setting our boundaries comes in online, because ultimately, especially when people are fearing what the other person would think, or fearing what the circumstances is, it's not that it's not the uncertainty that they're afraid of, it's the projection that they've put on the uncertainty that affects their decision, right?
Yeah, that's really what it is. It's also reactionatory after that, because when we expose things, I think a lot of times things are exposed on us, and us that know about really embracing the vulnerability part. And you put that so well. And where I like to say that it's up to you to share what you want to share. And I think people have the misconception that vulnerability mean I'm just going to let you know all my business, or I'm just going to tell you everything that's bad, or that I got defective with me going on. I think the vulnerability lies in you being able to understand that you're okay with that. You're embracing that. I'm not 100% this, or I'm not 100% that. But what I'm embracing is the idea that maybe with you, and I think how that connects us so much with humanity, if we're not open and authentic with people, how can we get help? How can we get resolution? How can we get, in some terms, a finality of things that we don't understand or things that we deal with? How can we go about with even encouraging others? I use my vulnerability as a tool of saying that it's okay for me. I like safe spaces, and I create safe spaces. I enjoy, not for people to come. I tell people all the time, it's not a place to come and be a pity party. No, we're not having that kind of gathering. But what we are is that sometimes there needs to be a place where someone can put down something that they're carrying, a burden or something that they're dealing with, and they're not quite sure, where or when I can deposit that. And I try to kind of be that, not to take on that, not to carry that for them, but to give them an opportunity to shed that in a place where it's okay. I'm not critiquing, I'm not criticizing, I'm not exposing you to exploit you and things like that. The pandemic, we shift to this. The pandemic has caused us to do a whole lot of soul searching, so to speak. And in the essence of that, vulnerability has come up, more so mental health, some of these aspects that mentally or physically we weren't really addressing prior to. What has the pandemic really taught Pauline over the course of this time?
Oh, Carl, how much time do we have? What has the pandemic taught Pauline? So many things. If I may, perhaps chunk it down to three things.
Sure.
Would that be okay if I chunk it down to three things?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
on your topic before about what you talked about, creating safe spaces. Creating a safe space presupposes that the space is not safe to start with.
Okay.
And so if we can understand that nothing grows fast in safe spaces. And so I think a lot of it is also when someone does come to a space where they know they are able to be vulnerable and to express their burdens, I think it also must come with the idea that in order to do so, there will be growth for you.
Mm-hmm.
That therefore adds a very different light. And so nothing grows fast in safe spaces. But you know what? If you were to express your vulnerability, should you wish to, there may be a whole lot of growth here. And so if we're talking about the pandemic and, a whole lot of people experiencing, for example, grief and loss, it is, the extension is that we're no longer talking about PTSD, post-traumatic trauma and stress. It now must become about post-traumatic growth, post-traumatic healing. And so can you do all these things with the view of, that if you do so, you may also heal and grow. I think that just gives it a very different expansive lens. But back to your point about the pandemic, okay, three things. I think first and foremost, it's the realization that we are living in a most profound place in time, right?
Yes.
We're living at a place in time where we are all at square one with ourselves again. And it is a changing of the history of humanity. And we cannot afford to not know this. It's a changing of the history of humanity. And, you know, we have to always look at or look for some of the benefits as well. So if we've experienced the first series of global lockdowns in the 5,000 years of recorded human history, how lucky are we that it has happened in such a technological age? Otherwise, you and I wouldn't be here, right? And I wouldn't
Right.
be here speaking to
Absolutely.
your audience. And
Yeah.
so the question is not about, you know, how are we going to continue to do what we're doing, but very much how are we going to do things differently in a very different world, so one of the things the pandemic has taught me is to change the questions now, not how are we going to continue doing what we're doing, but how are we going to do it very differently in a very different world. You know, other questions are, rather than saying how the hell are we going to get through this, the question now becomes how are we going to transform ourselves to get through this, because essentially the world literally stopped for us to reinvent ourselves, right?
Yes, it has, and a lot of people have done that. Yes, absolutely.
And so how has the organization, how has your organization, how has yourself used this time to for inquiry and reinvention, understanding that this contrast will inspire a very new desire. And so will we acknowledge this contrast? Will we follow through with this new desire? I think the second thing the pandemic has taught me, Carl, is that crisis doesn't change people. I've seen it time and time again. Crisis reveals people, right?
Yes, I would agree with that. Yes.
And how you do crisis is how you do life. And it's that are we using this time? Are we using this time to practice more mastery? Are we using this time to get physically fitter, emotionally more resilient, mentally more clear, spiritually more able, more expansive? How are we using this time? And the third lesson I've learned in the many lessons during this pandemic is that personal development cannot happen unless personal disruption happens first, right? Understanding that if we really want to change our personal reality, we have to really start changing our personality. Are we using this time to practice more mastery? You know, but then personal disruption can't happen unless personal introspection happens first. And so what more profound and intimate relationship do we have than the relationship with our own internet? Are we using this time to self-reflect and reinvent and rewrite and redesign? Because if we're not, we're just waiting for life to service us rather than us being in service to life. Fulfillment doesn't happen that way.
Wow, that's. I could say if I was on the shock, if I wanted to drop my mic, there would be a mic drop right there, Pauline. There would be a mic drop right there. So how
Bless, bless you.
with the understanding of that and what the pandemic has I say a blessing that has given us. This is not disclaiming or discounting the hurts, the losses, with the tragedies and the catastrophes and the calamities that it has also caused. It is also, it should be also an inspiration, which is, I've told people this and I say it again and I'll forever say it. It has really been the reset button being pushed for us as
Yes.
humanity. It really has. It has given us a place where we can go back and reassess, reevaluate, everything that we did prior to, because life from as we know it now are going to be pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. That is what we're going to be describing anything that goes on from now until what was going on before 2020 and what is taking place after it. And in the essence of that, how important do you think it's going to be for the vulnerability in corporations to kind of merge toward that understanding with us moving forward, with a lot of people transforming lives. I know people that have changed even their dynamics as far as learning, going to different, applying and doing different jobs, building businesses, jumping out on their own with things, not going back with that. How do you think this is going to be important for the growth of us going forward with companies and being vulnerable in leadership?
So, Carl, are you talking about vulnerability in leadership, or are you talking about vulnerability in organizations and
Well,
corporations? It could,
yes, in corporations first, let's start with that.
okay, because vulnerable leadership for me is very different to how the corporations are going to respond.
Okay.
Am I reading your questions correctly?
Yes, you are. I intertwine them, but definitely, if you have separate answers for those, please do. Please share.
Okay, first of all, I think your question about if it was to be post-pandemic, how is vulnerability going to be important for corporations? If I can get that clear, is that right?
Yes,
I think it would be essential to have the decision. I think plenty of companies can grow without vulnerability and vulnerable leadership. But if they want to do things differently and stay current in these current times, it's going to have to be a very different conversation with what it means to be a leader. I think in a lot of corporations, there's not a lot of leadership going on. I see a lot of management, but not a lot of leadership. What do leaders do? Leaders go first. I think within corporations, there's too much politics. And so not a lot of leaders step up and call it. I think it's very different to be a vulnerable leader in the corporate world. What's the difference with, what's the opposite of politics? The opposite of politics is radical transparency. I think the new way of vulnerable leadership in corporations needs to be radical transparency. But whether or not that would happen in the context of corporate culture, I don't know. But I think going back to work post-pandemic, I think that there needs to be some time given to the potential of rewriting the company culture, the potential of rewriting what it's going to mean to have very different conversations. Because I understand I come from an entrepreneurial background, by the way. I do coach and mentor a lot of corporates. I don't hang out in the corporate space day to day. I am an entrepreneur, but I do see a whole lot of it going on. And so I don't think it's possible to overestimate how challenging it's going to be when we go back to work full time in the company culture, because there has been so much grief and loss experienced. And so now that we're back in person, the culture needs to be rewritten. How can we be more vulnerable in our conversations to our colleagues? Do we wrap the conversations around, do we wrap it with cotton wool in order to not tread on eggshells, in order to not go deep? Or can we have the real vulnerable conversations and get super real? Can it still be okay for people to say, hey, I'm not okay. I wish I was okay, but I'm not there yet. I don't think I'll ever be there again. Can you help me? And so I think if businesses are going to go down this direction, it's going to certainly help if they were to allocate some time to rewriting the company culture to include context rather than dumb down the content. Did that answer that part of your question, Carl?
That was absolutely, and that's actually that was perfect, because that's what I really dive into the culture, because that is really what's going to change. I definitely agree with you that in corporations the word vulnerable is kind of like the bad word to say, and that's how business has been as usual for most corporations, and it's going to be a paradox for someone to come in there and individualize. But what we're going to have to do is the culture is definitely going to have to be revisited, rewritten, reassessed, reevaluated. Those things are, because we're going to have different conversations. I was talking to a gentleman last Friday, and we were talking about his culture, and he was just telling me some of the toxic things, or which him as being the CEO has allowed, but the culture has kind of like moved him. He hasn't moved the culture, and it's gotten so far away from where he envisioned it when he started the company. And I asked him a simple question in the essence of our conversation. I say, have you revisited the mission statement?
Yeah.
Have you revisited, what your mission is, your vision statement? Have you revisited some of those things that you initially built the company on? And are you going about the process of making sure that the newcomers are informed about that and the old ones aren't holding traditions that block the newcomers from being innovative and helping your company to grow? And his answer was, I haven't really looked at that. And I think, and this is what you're saying, it's going to have to be a difference. We're going to have to have those that are in those positions to sit down, have genuine conversations with people that it's affecting. All the time when I was in corporate, they used to tell me management make the rules because they don't have to do them. And I always thought that was a little funny thing, because you would always have somebody sitting on high writing the rules for something that someone sitting down in the lower level had to end up doing. And they were like, why are we doing it this way? It doesn't make sense to me. And I think that's where they really got that from. There's someone sitting on high, not understanding how it works, are making the rules for those who have to actually do the job below. So I think we're going to have to come into a place where we can have this discussion, and we can have it real, we can have it authentic, and we can have it inclusive to follow and to be effective for everyone involved. That's definitely it. Do you think they're going to be able to change the narrative of that, or what is your thinking on changing the narrative of how that even plays out with the culture? I know you said that you think it's not going to be easy. It's going to be an uphill battle. What are some of the things that you think will make this more obtainable to companies moving forward?
Well, what is culture? Culture is that shared unspoken assumption. It's a shared unspoken understanding. And so it's one thing to have a mission statement. It's another thing to say, is anyone actually reading this and following it? I've been to a lot of companies where the mission statement's on the wall,
Yeah,
and then
and
I look at
nobody's
the
doing
people
it.
and I say, does anyone follow this? And the people are like, we actually don't even know what it means, And so, but what is the culture? The culture is separate again. It's the shared unspoken assumption, the shared unspoken understanding. It's that shared way of thinking that drives certain behaviors and certain actions. It's how people communicate. And so, if we're talking about leadership, vulnerable leadership, as the topic of this discussion, it's, leadership is really about waking up and growing up, and waking up and growing up your people towards this active vision to make it meaningful for them. Does it actually have meaning for them? And so leading means to be able to traverse perspectives contextually, not by content and situation, but by context, so that you can deliver the right action in the right moment, what's required, given the team's needs, the individual's needs. The leader, what do leaders do? Leaders must go first. And so to answer your question about how would I go about changing this, I would go about changing it to perhaps change the definition. My definition of vulnerability in leadership is that the vulnerable leader must have competence. The vulnerable leader must not only have competence, but also have charisma. What do I mean by that? The competence is that they must have a proven record to have successfully or efficiently achieved something. Therefore, the people will listen to them. What do I mean by charisma? Charisma is that the skill set. They have to also have the skill set to call the elephant in the room, but still be able to maintain the relationships, and being okay that people may not be okay with the leadership answers. And so a vulnerable leader is the leader who is not afraid to have the fierce conversations, the leader who's not afraid to be the absolute conductor of truth, the leader who practices radical transparency. And so what do leaders do? They go first. They got to be able to really call it. The leader also understands that it's first and foremost about self-leadership. It's about self-leadership first. Are they doing the work on themselves first so that they can transcend the situation and transcend the situation so that they can see the context of the structure, the context of the processes, the context of the history of the situation, the inner game of the individual, the inner game of the collective. The vulnerable leader has to have time to be able to process and transcend all these things and practice contextual leadership. I think that's the new way of vulnerable leadership. They got to have the competence.
Yes.
They got to have the charisma, the skill set, and they got to have the balls to lead their people, not manage, but lead.
Yeah, and I think that's well, I know in the US is definitely in every and I can just say for assurance in every position that I've held, it's taken a lot of those things that I've had to display, but it's also in working with others where you didn't see those things. And when it comes to a capacity of the leaders are not leading, it's an essence of okay, I got 30 people under me, I'm just managing them as
Yes.
just checking off boxes saying, okay, are they coming in to work okay? Are they performing okay? Are they coming back from lunch? I mean, those are managers, but when you have people in leadership, these are people that's supposed to be dynamic with ideas and infusion
Yes.
that takes on, and you can tell those when you go into those different separate areas of corporations and companies and departments. I've been in departments and doing training, and I can see how one department is so elevated than another, and then I find the leader of that department and I actually say, okay, this is why, because this person is an visionary. They looking upon moving the crowd. They're looking on taking the crowd
Yes.
with them, not leaving anybody behind and leading it. And you've hit it on the head so well. It's just the vulnerable leader. It has to have the competence. We have so many people now that calling themselves leaders aren't competent to lead themselves, let alone others. And when you say that, it's not a disrespect to the person, it's really a disrespect to what you titled them, and you've given them this title that they're not living up to the mark. But my grandmother used to tell me that if people see you doing what you say, you'll have more people trusting in what you say. And I thought about that, and I said, okay, well, that's really when you look at even with Jesus and his meaning, and I go spiritual because we're just spiritual entrepreneur. When he taught, he led by examples. He taught parables, of course, but he led by examples. He done things where the disciples would see that what he did, so he can be an example for them. Are we really having leaders that are doing that today? Do you think? Or really having those that are really leading? Can you hear me? Did you hear me?
You?
I can you hear?
Okay.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Da, da, da. I hear you. I hear you.
I can't hear you. Can you continue to speak?
Okay. Yes. Then, like I was saying, do you think that the leadership of now, and I kind of got that with some of what you were just saying and changing that narrative of what you think the vulnerability are, what vulnerability means, and what it is. But how does that look like for our future with so much
The
at
sound's
stake?
dropped out. I'm sorry.
How much does that look like for our future with so much at stake now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear now? Uh, I don't know. I can hear you. Yeah, talk. Let me see if I can hear you.
Can you hear me, Carl?
Yes.
I can't hear you, and so I will need. I'm not sure what I need to do.
I can't hear me.
Okay,
Can you
I
hear me
can
now?
hear you
Okay.
now. I apologize for that.
No,
I'm
that's
sorry about
okay. Look, this is technology. This is what we're on. You know, it's not perfect. We do what we have to do, right? So let me see. I'm trying to think of the question I was asking you. In the essence of how you define vulnerability and what it is to you and with the leadership, uh, how do you think we go forward from here?
as in go forward from here.
It's us as individuals, because I know going back to work and to stay in that frame, I know that we're going back to work now, but we also got now, with the US especially, well, not especially, but also the variant is changing dynamics back. We're regressing in some areas of where that is. How important is that where we're asking these people to come back to work, back to these environments? How important is that for leaders to be involved with that and being able to be vulnerable in helping understand how this will take place?
I think it's in two parts.
Okay.
If we're talking about most people who listen to your podcast, Carl,
Yeah.
we're all leaders here. We're all leaders, and so it comes first and foremost about self leadership. And in these very, very uncertain times, the only thing that we can be absolutely certain of is how we show up. How we show up. And so we get to choose how we can show up. Do we show up with dignity, grace, and poise? Because as a leader, we have to be consistent. We also have we need to also be competent, as well as have the charisma, the skill set. And so if we only have control, if we don't have control over so many things, ask ourselves, what do we have control over? We have control over ourselves. And so what can we be doing, to answer your question, going into these uncertain times, to absolutely reconcile with the fact that change is here to stay. Change is the only constant. Change is the only constant. And so not only must we be expecting change, and change is going to happen at a more rapid pace now, we have to also be embracing change, and then also becoming the change, changing before we are forced to change. And so I think at this time, it's really, really important to use this time to get physically fitter, physically healthier, work on our mental health, our physical health, our emotional health, and work on our spiritual health, so that when we are in a state of being able to be vulnerable, we do come to it from a space of, I will do this in order for me to grow, in order for me to heal, And so coming into it with a sense of being able to be the conductor of truth, being able to practice radical transparency, the potent value exchange through authentic expression. And this way we can really have true connection, rather than beating around the bush, treading on eggshells, and showing that part of ourselves that was not considered appropriate before.
Yeah, awesome. This has been man, an eye-opening conversation. I've had my thoughts about vulnerability all the time, but you've given me so much food for thought in some of the things and some of the ways that I will now continue to talk about vulnerability, because it's in my heart. It's important to me, and it's definitely the explanation that you gave, the example that you gave of the charisma and the competence is actually key to that, because man, you put it together so well. You're gonna have to be, in other words, for the lighthearted, you're gonna have to be smart enough, and you're gonna have to be smooth enough where you can be able to match those two together, so people can get understanding and they can be led the way that they need to be led, because we've been managing people for a long time. Uh, the management has been going on for a long time, and I think you have people now that are growing. They're changing themselves, the dynamic of themselves. they're recreating themselves, and they're going about things in a whole different manner than before. Now it's going to be what's going on afterwards. Now I always ask a funny question in the end, and I say this and I ask this question because this question oftentimes give me insight to individual. I use my psychology kind of like educational part of me when I ask this, and I ask everyone who's on my show two last questions, and one's funny and one is one perspective. And I'll ask you the funny one first. If you could be an animal, any animal, what animal would you be? What animal would Pauline be?
The raven.
The raven. The raven. I think you're the only one that ever said that on my show. The raven. I got unicorn yesterday, so I get raven today. So
The raven,
why the raven?
the raven is the bird of the shaman.
Mm-hmm.
The raven is the known in the spiritual world as the only bird that can traverse in and out of dimensions, multiple dimensions, and come back with messages that the people need to hear.
Oh, raven. Maybe I have to change who I'm gonna be now. I have to change.
Who are you?
And,
Who are you currently?
huh?
What are you? What animal are you currently?
I'm currently the lion, and I choose that aspect. I had a story that I often shared that my dad shared with me when I was young, and he was just telling me about being. He used to always tell us as kids, just be, just be. And we really couldn't understand that because he was said to us, and he was like, just be, whatever it is, just be. And a lot of it was short of him saying, whatever you decide to do with it, just be that, embrace that, and be that. And I think my younger brother had asked him, and we were sitting on the sofa one evening, and my younger brother asked him, well, what are we supposed to be? Because my younger brother was always inquisitive. And he said, well, what are we supposed to be, Dad? And my dad bust out with this lion story. And he told us about the lion and how the lion, he said, have you ever read a story or you've seen the cartoons or you've seen anything and you've heard about the lion walking around the jungle explaining to anybody who he was? And we as kids, we couldn't take in the full realm of that because we're thinking about a lion and we're thinking about jungles, and we haven't had the knowledge of understanding of things as I do now. And I carry that with me all the time because what he was saying is that if you're being who you are, people will know who you are. If you're being true to who you are, people will know you as who you are. And he said that to us. He said the lion doesn't go around the jungle asking anybody who he is because everybody already knows who he is. He's the lion. He's just being the lion. So when I take that now, so many years later, I got the understanding of that. The lion doesn't have to put on for anyone. He is who he is. He walks how he walks. He's respected how he is. And nothing of that takes away from who he is because it is him. And that's why I've always chose the lion because I just am who I am. I don't have to put on for anyone. I am who I am. So that was my that was my animal. Now the last question I asked you, and this is another good one. If you had one thing, I often ask people this because it's always something in our life that we may think it should have been different. We may have done differently, may have wanted differently. But if you had one thing that you can change in the life of Pauline, what would that one thing be?
If I could change one thing, would be to be able to speak to my younger self and say, baby girl, everything's going to be okay. In fact, it's going to be magical. Stop crying now. Choose thoughts that create more joy.
Man, that was powerful. That was powerful. I felt that one right here in the heart section. I felt that one because it means so much more than what the words you said. It's the message behind what you just said, and I thank you for sharing that with us, Pauline. This has been great. I appreciate you coming on. Tell everyone how they can look at some of the things you're doing, get involved, follow you, find out more about you, and we have some people that's interested in knowing more about you. Tell them where we can find you and where we can look you up at.
Sure. My website is, I'm sure that you'll give everyone my website. A lot of information on my website. I've written 2 books. Both have won awards. The most recent one is called The Way of the Spiritual Entrepreneur, The 7 Secrets to Become a Fearless, Stress-Free, and Unshakable in Business and in Life. It's available through my website if you want a personalized copy, or it's also on Audible, and you get to hear my sexy voice reading it to you. And of course, if you would like to get in contact with me, you can email me at Pauline at paulinenguyen.com.au.
Thank you so much, Pauline. I appreciate everything that you've done today. I appreciate you coming on and gracing us. For everyone that has been here, we're going to play the replay. We're definitely going to get answers. We're going to get comments. We're going to get questions. Please drop them in on the replay. Any questions we get, I'll definitely tag you, Pauline, and we make sure we answer those. It has been lovely. I appreciate you spending time out of your lovely Wednesday morning to talk with me today in our Tuesday afternoon. And I appreciate you, dear. Thank you so very much. I appreciate everybody for stopping by. We thank you for how you came. We thank you for what you've employed in us, what you've given us, the thoughts and the gems that you share with us. They are priceless, and we definitely will take them to heart. I will be in touch with you some more because I need some one-on-one sessions. I need to learn some things from you. You have so much to offer and such a joy to talk with, and such a competent, if I can say, that's really not giving you all your glory, but a competent speaker and eloquent lady as yourself. We definitely got to do some things, and I look to collaborate in some form or fashion with you in another form, in another way, sometime in the near future. I think it's really going to be exciting to do, and I think especially that I can see it now, The Lion and the Raven. That could be a new Disney movie. You know what I mean? We got a lot that we can do right there.
Bless you, Carl. I've had so many requests from the audience from your part of the world, because I also facilitate and teach very effective and impactful online courses, but in Australia time. And so I'm gathering a group of people, and if your listeners are interested, to email me, and then if I have enough interest, I'll get up for US time to teach. and old souls love to collaborate, right?
Yes, definitely want to collaborate. We definitely want to do that. I'll definitely be emailing you to get some more information to see how I can spread the word. I'll be posting this out so everyone can see it on our side, and they can definitely get a feature. I'll give you also, when I record it, I'll send you a copy as well. It has just been a ball. It has been a joy. Thank you so much, Pauline. I appreciate you spending the time with me. Thank everyone who came by. And for you guys on Pauline's side of the world, you guys have a beautiful Wednesday morning. And for my side of the world, you guys have a great Tuesday evening. And thank you again, Pauline. We'll talk soon.
Carl, the joy and the privilege has been mine.
Thank you. Thank you so much.